Danjin has gotten quite a bit of upgrades in the release of 2.0. So, in today's video, I'll show you exactly how to build and use Danjin.
Eradicate.
Danjin is a Havok sub and main DPS. She uses a sword whilst dealing mainly heavy attack damage, with a bit of skill damage. Danjin deals a lot of damage with her Forte circuit. The only way of filling her circuit bar is by using her resonance skill. Your resonance skill has no cooldown whilst having 3 different combo attacks that trigger after you've used a certain amount of basic attacks. If you instantly use your skill, or if you use one basic attack and then use your skill, Danjin will use Carmine Gleam. This is a singular upswing and can chain into your basic attack too. When using your basic attack 2 or a dodge counter, you can use your resonance skill to release Crimson Erosion, which can be used 2 times in a row. With the second hit applying a mark to the enemy, which allows Danjin to deal 20% increased damage to that enemy for 12 seconds. For the final combo attack, you will need to use your third basic attack, after which you can use your resonance skill 3 times in a row to release Sanguine Pulse. This combo deals the most damage out of all the combos. Each attack of Danjin's resonance skill consumes 3% of her HP, even when she doesn't hit an enemy. And attacks that have multiple hits will consume 3% HP for each hit in that attack. This may seem bad, but every time Danjin consumes her own HP, she fills her Forte bar by a bit. When she reaches 50% of her Forte bar, she can unleash a special Forte heavy attack called Chaos Cleave. You can follow this up by using your basic attack to use Scatter Bloom, which both do a big amount of damage. However, if you completely fill your Forte bar, she will instead do 2.4 times the amount of damage with the same attack. Both of these attacks will heal Danjin for 36%, whilst generating a huge amount of Concerto energy for her, making Danjin a really good sub DPS whilst having main DPS damage. Danjin's Resonance Liberation,
Judgment.
Crimson Bloom, deals a lot of damage in an AoE, whilst freezing time while she is unleashing it. This liberation has a low 16-second cooldown, whilst only costing 100 resonance energy. Now, for her outro skill. Danjin's outro skill doesn't deal any damage, but instead, she buffs the incoming Resonator's Havok damage bonus by 23% for 14 seconds, making her sub DPS potential even greater. And lastly, her inherent skills. Her first inherent skill decreases the amount of time Danjin is on the field gathering Forte points, whilst also increasing her damage. Since for every Crimson Erosion combo after her dodge counter, she will now deal 20% more damage whilst doubling the HP cost and her Forte generation. This makes the dodge counter Crimson Erosion the fastest way to generate Forte points. And her second inherent skill will grant Danjin 30% heavy attack damage for 5 seconds after using her Sanguine Pulse combo. This complements Danjin's kit, synergizing perfectly with her Forte circuit. As for leveling priorities, I recommend leveling her Forte circuit, followed by her resonance skill and finally her liberation. Her basic attacks are used in her combos, but don't deal any significant damage, so together with her intro skill, these two can be ignored, unless you really want to max out your Danjin.
No mercy.
Danjin plays around her Incinerating Wheel Mark, which she can apply with her Crimson Erosion skill combo after using her basic attack 2, dodge counter or intro skill. After applying the mark, you want to use your Echo if you're using the Countless, which you can dash cancel out of. And after that, you want to start off with a Resonance skill, followed by 2 basic attacks, and then followed again by 3 Resonance skills. You want to keep doing this until you fill your Forte bar completely. When her Forte bar is filled, she can use her heavy and basic attack to unleash her Forte circuit attack. After that is done, she can use her liberation and swap off. As a main DPS, she will want to completely fill her Forte bar, so she can deal as much damage as possible, since she wants the most field time on the team. But if you want to use her as a sub DPS for Havok Rover or Camellia for example, filling the Forte bar halfway is more than enough, since you still gain a massive amount of Concerto energy from it. These are basic rotations, and at the team section, I will go more in depth for specific teams.
Gotta be careful.
Danjin has multiple weapon options that work for her kit. The first premium option will still be the Blazing Brilliance, Chang'Li's signature weapon. This weapon has high base attack and a good amount of crit rate, as well as the high skill damage bonus on her passive. Because of this weapon is almost perfect for Danjin. If you don't have this weapon however, you could also use the Emerald of Genesis. It has the same main and substats, however, its passive grants energy recharge and attack percent. For the free to play options, the first will be the Subnoir Anchor. This weapon was free in an event couple of weeks ago, so there is a high chance you have it. If you don't, these weapons will also work for her.
Judgment.
If you're running Danjin as a main DPS, you're still gonna want to use the Sun Sinking Eclipse set, since you will always need basic attacks to continue your combo attacks before dealing massive damage with your Forte circuit. For her 4 cost, she can use either the Crownless or the Dreamless. The Dreamless is better for when you want a quick swap, whilst the Crownless can be dash cancelled out of while still retaining the Havoc and skill damage buffs it grants. If you want to use it as a sub DPS, you can use the new Midnight Veil set. Since besides granting Danjin some more damage, it will also grant the incoming resonators some more damage, balancing the damage between the main and sub DPS. For the 4 cost, you want to use the Nightmare Impermanence Heron, since it gives Havoc and heavy attack damage buffs as long as you have it in the main Echo slot. As for the active, it deals a good amount of damage in a good AoE. But if you want to run her as a fully fledged support, you can use the Moonlit Clouds set. This set will make you deal less damage, but it'll buff the incoming resonator by a lot. For the 4 cost, you'll want to use the standard Impermanence Heron. The active effect will deal some damage, which is counted as Havoc damage, and it'll make the incoming resonator deal extra damage for a while, making it the go-to option for Danjin. The main sets on these echoes will all be the same. You'll want crit rate or crit damage on the 4 cost, Havoc damage bonus on the 3 cost, and attack percent on the 1 cost. For her substats, you want as many crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, attack percent and heavy attack rolls as you can get, with flat attack, resonance skill damage and resonance liberation damage being a nice extra if you roll it. Keep in mind, if you have sequence 4, Danjin will increase her crit rate by 15% when she has filled her Forte bar halfway, so make sure you don't overstack on crit rate. Danjin has quite a few resonators that synergize well with her. As for the healer, I will always slot in Farina for simplicity, but Shorekeeper or Baiji will work as well. For the first team, we have Danjin paired up with Mortefi. Because of the double 4-star pairing, this is a great free-to-play option, whilst also being one of the strongest main DPS Danjin teams. You want to start by rotating from Farina to Mortefi, and then from Mortefi to Danjin, giving her both Farina's outro and echo buffs as well as Mortefi's outro and echo buffs. Then, you want to start by using your Crimson Erosion combo, followed up by a Crownless dodge cancel out of it. Then, use Sanguine Pulse combos whilst also using your dodge counters as much as possible. I do recommend that you use Sanguine Pulse combos right before your Forte circuit attack, since their inherent skill buffs heavy attack damage by a lot right after using your Sanguine Pulse. Once you've filled your Forte bar all the way, you can use your Forte circuit, Resonance Liberation, and finally swap out towards your healer. The second team will feature a premium 5-star unit, and it is none other than Zezhe. Zezhe provides resonance skill damage whilst also dealing quite a bit of damage using coordinated attacks. And since Zezhe uses the new Empyrean Anthem set, which buffs both herself and the active resonator, this team will be more like a split DPS team, although you still run it as a hyper carry Danjin team. For the rotation, you want to use basic attack 3 times with Zezhe while swapping out to your healer in the third attack. After, you auto skill from your healer to Zezhe and instantly use her skill into a basic attack, then triple E and use your Resonance Liberation and auto skill into Danjin. From there, Danjin can do the same rotation she did with Mortefi. For the final premium resonator, we have the newly released Troll in a Box, Roshia. Roshia can provide Danjin with lots of Havoc damage, with even more Havoc damage if you've unlocked Sequence 2 of Roshia, which grants 40% Havoc damage to the entire team. In this team, you will once again want to swap from your healer into Roshia and from Roshia into Danjin, which will do her standard rotation and swap back to your healer. A honorable mention for main DPS teams will be Lumi. Although Lumi is a great unit, Mortefi will always be better than Lumi in Danjin's case. But if you don't have Mortefi, Lumi will be a great free-to-play option. If you're using Danjin as a sub DPS or support, you can run her in these 3 teams. First, we have Quickswap Zhangli Yao. In this team, you want to swap between GHIBLI and Danjin a lot of times, making use of GHIBLI's time stops and Danjin's heavy attacks. In this team, you'll definitely want to use the Dreamless Echo if you're using the Sun Sinking Eclipse set. And if you're using the Midnight Veil or Moonlit Cloud set, you'll want to use either the Standard or the Nightmare Impermanence Heron, since you can quick swap out of each of these echoes. Since this is a quick swap team, it is quite a bit harder to play than the others, so I recommend to use one of the other teams unless you're quite a skilled player. Next up, we have Havelgrover and Camellia. Danjin is perfect for Havelgrover, while she's also really good for Camellia. Since Havelgrover deals all kinds of Havok damage, Danjin's buffs are even better than Sanwa's. In this team, or Camellia's teams, you want to use either the Midnight Veil or the Moonlit Cloud set, depending on whether you want Danjin to deal damage or if you want to hyper carry with Rover or Camellia. For your Rover's rotations, you want to use your Resonance skill on Rover, swap to your healer without an intro skill, then intro skill from your healer to Danjin, which will use her Crimson Erosion into Songwind Pulse, and when she has half her Forte bar, she can use her Forte Circuit attacks, after which she uses her Liberation and Echo, and whilst using your Echo you can swap into Havelgrover. As for Camellia, you want to intro from Farina to Camellia, on which you build 10 bot stacks, whilst not completely filling your Concerto bar. Then swap to Danjin, which will do her Crimson Erosion into a Sanguine Pulse, followed up by her Forte Circuit attacks, and finally she can use her Liberation and Echo, in which you can swap towards Camellia to do her rotation. Danjin sequences are all actually pretty good, so let's go over them. Sequence 1 will increase Danjin's attack by 5% for 6 seconds every time she attacks an enemy with her Resonance skill. This can stack up to 6 times, and she will lose 1 stack when she gets hit. This is a pretty good sequence, buffing her attack by 30% for just playing her correctly. Sequence 2 will increase the damage she dealt by her Resonance skill by 20%. This is not a huge buff, but it is a nice one nonetheless. Sequence 3 increases her Liberation damage by 30%. This is fine, since she can use her Liberation almost, if not every rotation. So, this will be a nice damage increase. Sequence 4 will increase Danjin's crit rate by 15% if she has her Forte bar more than halfway filled. This effect will last until after her basic attack from her Forte heavy attack. This is a really nice sequence, allowing you to build even more crit damage on Danjin. Sequence 5 will increase Danjin's Havok damage by 15%, and if Danjin is below 60% HP, she will gain another 15% Havok damage bonus. This is a good sequence, giving her a nice amount of Havok damage bonus. And finally, Sequence 6. After casting her basic attack from her Forte heavy attack, she will increase the attack of the entire team by 20%. This is a pretty basic Sequence 6, since almost all 4-star resonators have it, but it is a pretty decent one nonetheless.
Guide my blade.
I personally love her playstyle. Her dangerous gameplay and low health will always keep you on the edge of your seat. And even though she's a 4-star, her Sequence 6 damage is still pretty close to some 5-star resonators without sequences. So she will definitely be able to clear the Tower of Adversity. And with all her animations being short and snappy, her gameplay will feel very satisfying to play. Although some people might not like the 1% HP playstyle in her DPS mode, she will pretty much always be above 60% HP in her sub DPS mode. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, may I recommend the video on the screen right now? I appreciate you all. Bye bye.